in the quiet heartland of rural America, where cornfields stretch for miles and life moves slow and steady, a young farm girl named Emily Parker lives a life of solitude and hard work. But everything changes the night a bleeding stranger collapses at her doorstep. Against her better judgment and every survival instinct, Emily helps him. What starts as a simple act of kindness spirals into a deadly game of cat and mouse. The man she saved is no ordinary traveler. He's a fugitive on the run from a covert military program gone rogue, and he carries with him damning secrets that could shatter powerful institutions. By morning, black helicopters roar across her skies. Tactical teams surround her land, and her once safe barn becomes a battleground. As Emily is thrust into a high-stakes conspiracy of bioengineered weapons, government cover-ups, and betrayal, she must decide whether to run, fight, or expose the truth, no matter the cost. The first rays of sun filtered through the fog-draped hills, brushing golden fingers across the rolling fields of Parker Farm. A rooster crowed from the coop, its call breaking the stillness of the morning like clockwork. Emily Parker wiped her hands on the worn hem of her flannel shirt as she stepped out of the farmhouse, boots crunching over the gravel path that led to the barn. The scent of fresh hay, damp earth, and dew-slicked grass filled her lungs. To most, this was a forgotten corner of rural America, silent, simple, slow. But to Emily, it was home, her anchor in a world that had moved on without her. She paused to scan the fields. Corn, soy, and wheat stood like soldiers in the mist. A lone windmill creaked in the distance. The land had been in her family for generations, but now she was the last Parker left. After her parents' sudden car accident 3 years ago, the quiet farm had fallen entirely to her. At 23, Emily bore the weight of the legacy alone. She worked sunup to sundown, fixing what broke, planting what she could, selling what little the soil yielded. This morning felt no different until it did. As she approached the barn, a strange sound snagged her attention. Not the groan of wood settling or the distant rustle of cattle, but something more. Metallic, distant like a hum or a whir. She turned toward the tree line at the edge of her land, but saw nothing unusual. Shrugging it off as a crop duster or maybe the Johnson's ancient ATV backfiring across the hill, she continued with her chores. Inside the barn, the animals stirred. Her Jersey cow, Daisy, greeted her with a soft low, and the goats bleated for their breakfast. Emily smiled faintly and got to work. This was her rhythm, her peace. It had been months since she'd seen more than a mail carrier or the occasional neighbor, and that was how she liked it. By mid-morning, the sun burned away the fog, revealing the long stretch of open fields surrounding the farm. Emily set out feed, refilled water troughs, and repaired a broken gate with practiced hands. She worked in silence, broken only by the hum of bees and the whisper of wind rustling stalks. Then came the second noise, a crack, sharp and sudden, like a gunshot muffled by distance. Emily froze, instinctively ducking behind the feed bins. Her heart thudded in her chest as she scanned the horizon. Silence returned. Birds still chirped. The cows grazed unbothered, no movement. Maybe a fallen tree limb, maybe nothing. Still, she made a mental note to check the back pasture later. Back in the farmhouse, she sat down for a quick lunch. Just a cold sandwich and sweet tea, when a loud thud against the porch startled her. She sprang to her feet, knocking over her chair in the process. Emily opened the door, and her breath caught. A man lay crumpled on the porch boards. His face was pale, streaked with blood, and sweat matted his dark hair to his forehead. One arm clutched his ribs while the other weakly reached toward her. His clothes were torn, stained with mud and something darker, his own blood. A pistol, scratched and battered, was barely visible beneath his coat. "Please," he rasped, voice thin as parchment. "Help." Emily didn't move at first. She stared at him, her instincts shouting at her to shut the door, call the sheriff, get far away. But her feet betrayed her thoughts. She stepped forward. "Who are you?" she asked, voice trembling. The man didn't answer. His eyes rolled back and he collapsed unconscious. Emily's mind raced. He needed help, now. She couldn't just leave him there. But if he was dangerous, if he was a fugitive or worse? Still, something inside her pushed her forward. The same quiet resilience that had kept her going since her parents died whispered that she'd know what to do. She bent down, slid her arms under his, and with great effort dragged him inside the farmhouse. Blood smeared across her wooden floors as she eased him onto the couch. "I hope I don't regret this," she muttered, grabbing towels and the first aid kit. Outside, the sun blazed innocently over the hills, but in the distance, barely audible, the faint thrum of helicopter blades stirred the air. Emily had patched up wounded animals before, a barbed wire gash on a sheep, a dog hit by a pickup, even once helping a deer caught in a trap. But this was different. This was a man, a stranger, and he was in bad shape. She worked quickly, hands trembling but precise. His jacket, when she peeled it back, revealed a deep puncture wound in his side, ragged but not fresh. Whatever had hurt him hadn't been yesterday, but maybe the day before. It had been bleeding slowly, dangerously. She cleaned it with antiseptic, then wrapped it tightly with gauze and one of her old flannel shirts. His other injuries were mostly cuts and bruises. His ankle looked swollen but not broken. He stirred once, groaning, and she almost dropped the bandages. "Easy," she whispered. "You're safe, for now." When she finished, she sat back and finally let herself breathe. Her living room, modest, cluttered with books and blankets, now smelled of blood and iodine. A heavy silence hung in the air, punctuated only by the slow ticking of the grandfather clock by the stairs. She glanced toward the window. Noon was near, and then she heard it, a low rumble, distant but growing. Not a truck, not thunder. The sound was unmistakable, rotors. She stepped onto the porch and shaded her eyes. Over the far ridge, something moved against the sky, black specks growing larger. She squinted. Helicopters, 3 of them, military grade by the looks of it, no markings she could make out. They flew in a tight formation, cutting across the hills like a hunting pack. Emily's breath hitched. They weren't just passing through, they were circling, scanning. She ducked back inside and shut the door, heart pounding. Was it about him? Who was he? She turned back to the man on her couch. His breathing had steadied. Color was slowly returning to his face. There was a hardness there, even unconscious, a man used to pain, maybe used to war. She rifled through his jacket. Inside was a worn wallet, no license, no cards, just a folded picture of a young girl and a receipt from a gas station in Nevada dated 2 days ago. There was also a small black disc tucked into an inner lining. No label, no button, not even a visible port. She turned it over, puzzled. It looked like a high-end flash drive or a biometric key of some sort. "What the hell are you carrying?" she whispered. The helicopters thumped overhead again, this time louder. Dust on the windowsills rattled. She had no signal on her phone. She tried the landline. Dead. Not even a dial tone. The timing was too exact. This wasn't a coincidence. She pulled the curtain shut, locked the doors, and grabbed the old shotgun her father had kept mounted above the fireplace. She hadn't used it in years, but the metal still felt solid in her hands. She double-checked the shells, loaded, then she sat across from him and waited. 10 minutes passed, then 20. No knock, no voices, no soldiers bursting through her fields. The helicopters eventually moved on, fading toward the east, leaving behind a tense, buzzing silence. But her instincts screamed they weren't gone for good. They were searching, they were mapping, and they'd be back. The man stirred again. This time his eyes fluttered open, stormy gray and sharp. He scanned the room with quick, practiced movements and locked eyes with her. "You helped me?" he croaked. Emily nodded slowly. "Yeah, I did." He tried to sit up and winced hard, falling back. "Shouldn't have." "Why?" she asked, gripping the shotgun a little tighter. "Who are you?" He stared at her for a long moment. "Name's Daniel, and you just stepped into something you didn't sign up for." She swallowed hard. "Start explaining, now." But Daniel's eyes rolled back again. He slumped into unconsciousness. Emily sat frozen for a moment, then leaned back against the wall, shotgun still across her lap. Outside, the wind stirred the tall grass. The sky, clear and blue just hours ago, now carried an edge, like the air before a storm. She didn't know what was coming, but she knew one thing. The peace of Parker Farm had just been shattered. Daniel drifted in and out of consciousness for the next few hours. Emily kept watch, the shotgun never far from reach. His face twitched from time to time, eyes fluttering, muscles tense, muttering things she couldn't make out. She gave him water between spells and wiped his brow with a damp cloth. The wound was clean, the bleeding had slowed, but he hadn't spoken since that single cryptic sentence. "You just stepped into something you didn't sign up for." By early evening, the sound of approaching thunder made her stiffen, but this time it was real. A storm front was rolling in from the west, black clouds stacking over the tree line. Rain tapped at the roof like impatient fingers. The land, so open and exposed, offered no comfort. Daniel stirred again. More alert now, he groaned and pushed himself upright with effort. "Hey," Emily said softly, sitting across from him. "You're not going anywhere in that condition." His eyes snapped to her, and this time they were clear, piercing. "Where am I?" "Parker Farm," she replied, "middle of nowhere, Missouri." He looked around, measuring the room. "You live alone?" Emily didn't answer right away. "I ask the questions right now. You're on my land, bleeding all over my couch, and I just watched 3 unmarked helicopters circle my property. You want to tell me what's going on?" Daniel winced as he shifted. "I didn't mean to bring trouble here." "Well, you did." He ran a hand over his face. "I'm not who they say I am." "Who are you?" He hesitated. "I used to be someone else, military, special operations, but I walked away, or tried to. The people I worked for, they don't let things go." Emily crossed her arms. "And the helicopters? They're not here for sightseeing." Before she could press further, lightning flashed, followed by a sharp crack of thunder. The power flickered, then went out. Emily cursed under her breath and lit an oil lantern. Daniel reached into his jacket, then froze. "Where's my drive?" She raised an eyebrow. "That weird disc thing? I put it in the drawer with the lamp. What is it?" "It's the only thing that proves what they're doing," he said. "That's why I'm still alive." Emily stared at him. "What are they doing?" Daniel looked at her, exhausted, determined. "Creating weapons, not bombs, people. The words hung in the air like static. Emily blinked. Weapons? People? Daniel nodded, wincing as he leaned forward. Biotech experiments, military-grade enhancement programs, illegally tested on prisoners, refugees, even civilians. I found out. I took this. He nodded toward the drawer and ran. Emily opened the drawer and pulled out the device. It was matte black and seamless, like it had been grown instead of built. It vibrated faintly in her hand. This thing looks like it came out of a spaceship. Near enough, he muttered. She narrowed her eyes. Why bring it here? I didn't mean to, he said. I was trying to disappear. I ambushed 2 towns over. Barely made it this far on foot. Didn't know where I was going until I collapsed. Emily stared at him, weighing her options. She could call for help, if the phones ever worked again. She could turn him in, hope the government took him away and left her in peace. Or she could believe him, protect him, harbor him. It was madness, but something in his voice, raw and unfiltered, rang true. If I help you, she said slowly, they'll come for me too. They already are. Outside, the storm pounded the land like war drums. The decision was already made. The rain had slowed by nightfall, but the clouds refused to clear. Emily had helped Daniel up the stairs to the guest bedroom, a sparse, quiet space with a view of the east pasture. He fell asleep almost instantly, breathing heavy but steady. Emily, however, couldn't rest. She paced the living room, replaying everything, his wounds, the helicopters, the strange device. She stared out the window at the darkened fields. Normally, she found comfort in the stillness of her land. Tonight, the silence was a trap. The darkness held its breath. She grabbed her flashlight and stepped outside, sweeping it across the yard. The barn doors creaked in the wind. The animals were unusually quiet. That's when she saw it. Footprints, muddy, deep, and not hers, leading from the road to the back of the barn. She knelt to examine them. Wide stride, heavy tread, tactical boots. Her heart pounded. Someone had already been here, recently. She backed toward the house, flashlight trembling in her hand. Behind her, a branch cracked. She spun, light cutting through the trees. Nothing. But she wasn't alone. Inside the house, Daniel stirred again, eyes snapping open as if some sixth sense had triggered. They've found me, he whispered. Emily didn't sleep that night. She sat by the front window with the shotgun across her lap, lantern flickering beside her. The house felt tighter than usual, its wooden bones groaning with the wind. Every creak and shifting shadow put her nerves on edge. She replayed the moment at the barn. Those muddy footprints burned into her mind. Someone had been out there, close, maybe watching, maybe more. Daniel remained upstairs, resting. He hadn't said another word since whispering, "They've found me." Whether he was sleeping or just too weak to move, she didn't know. But part of her was grateful he hadn't stirred. If he had more to tell her, she wasn't sure she was ready to hear it. Near dawn, Emily finally stepped out into the chill. The sky was dull gray, the sun hidden behind clouds thick with rain. She walked quietly to the barn, eyes scanning every inch of open ground. She moved the flashlight low and slow, careful not to miss anything. At the base of the barn's side wall, she found a scuff mark, fresh, and higher up, on the weathered wooden slats, a small metal object glinted faintly. She reached for it and pulled it down. A trail camera. It wasn't hers. She turned it over. Military grade, compact, weatherproof, well hidden. A slow dread settled in her gut. She wasn't just being watched, they were recording her. Back in the house, Daniel was awake, sitting up with effort. Sweat slicked his brow, but his eyes were sharp again. They had a scout team here, Emily said, tossing the camera onto the coffee table. Last night. Daniel stared at the device, then gave a bitter laugh. They're faster than I thought. You need to tell me everything now. He nodded. They're not an official military, not anymore. Private, off-the-books contract team, blackout operations. They want that drive because it's proof of everything. Human testing, augmented soldier prototypes, illegal tech leaks. I took it, ran. They'll bury anyone in their way. Emily exhaled slowly. That includes me now. I never wanted to involve anyone, he said. But you've got guts. Most people would have left me to die. I'm not most people, she replied. Their eyes met, and for a brief moment there was understanding, not trust, not yet, but something just as powerful. Shared fear. Emily crossed her arms. So, what's the plan? Daniel coughed, wincing. Right now? Survive the next 24 hours. They'll come hard and fast once they know I'm here. She gave a small, defiant nod. Then we make them regret showing up. By midday, Emily had reinforced every door and window in the house. She dragged furniture across thresholds, boarded up the ground floor windows with scrap plywood, and set up the motion lights she usually used for raccoons. Daniel helped where he could, limping around with grit and stubbornness despite the pain. He refused to lie idle again. You're lucky I keep old fencing tools around, Emily muttered as she reinforced the barn's latch with extra wire. These nails are older than I am. Daniel grinned, leaning against a support beam. Remind me to leave you a 5-star review when this is over. She glanced sideways at him. You're joking during a manhunt? I joke when I'm scared, he said, and I'm terrified. Emily chuckled despite herself. It was the first real laugh she'd had in days, but it didn't last long. Her eyes moved toward the distant ridge where the helicopters had hovered just a day ago. Every inch of her land felt like it was holding its breath. Daniel followed her gaze. They'll come back, but this place, this farm, has a lot more soul than they expect. What does that mean? It means they won't be ready for you. She looked at him then, searching for sarcasm, but his face was earnest. You didn't just save me, he added quietly. You gave me a chance to stop them, to make things right. I owe you. I didn't do it for a debt, she said. I did it because no one deserves to die alone in the dirt. Daniel nodded slowly. Still, when the time comes, when they come, I won't let them touch you. A moment of silence passed. A flicker of trust now hung between them, fragile, unspoken. Back in the house, Emily brought out an old CB radio from her father's closet. The antenna had long been disconnected, but with some jury rigging and a few new wires, it sputtered to life. Static crackled. She scanned through the bands. After several empty channels, she paused. Unit Echo, maintain grid pattern. Farm perimeter sweep ongoing. No contact yet. Over. Her stomach dropped. Daniel tensed. They're already here. She turned the radio off. We've got hours, maybe less. And with that, the silence of Parker Farm shattered again. Not with gunfire or rotors, but with the undeniable truth. The war had found its way to her doorstep. Here are the next two chapters of kindness in the crosshairs, continuing the tense buildup. The farm never felt quite like this before, not peaceful, but tense, like the earth itself was bracing for impact. Emily spent the early afternoon finishing her improvised defenses. She laid tripwires with empty cans across the west field path, tied bells to the rear gate, and repositioned the few old motion sensors she had around the house. Every creak in the wood, every gust of wind, every cry of a crow in the sky made her twitch. Daniel, now moving with slow but deliberate steadiness, insisted on helping. He didn't speak much. He didn't have to. The silence between them had shifted. It was no longer born of uncertainty, but of preparation. By 3 p.m., clouds began to move in again. The forecast said clear skies, but Emily no longer trusted forecasts. Inside the house, she laid out 2 hunting knives, extra shotgun shells, and her grandfather's revolver. Daniel studied the layout, nodding. "You were a scout," he said, almost smiling. "You know how to prepare." "I know how to survive," Emily said. "Same as you." He touched the encrypted drive, which now sat sealed in a mason jar, buried beneath the barn floor. "If anything happens to me, you need to get that to someone who can publish it. Not the police, not anyone local." "Who then?" Daniel hesitated. "A journalist. Name's Nina Mallory, based in Chicago. Used to cover foreign conflicts. She's been on to these programs for years." Emily raised an eyebrow. "Do you trust her?" "She saved me once, the way you did." Outside, the sky darkened as the sun dipped behind the clouds. The animals were restless. Even the chickens clucked nervously in their coop. As the wind picked up, Daniel stood on the porch with her, scanning the distant fields. The fields looked calm, rows of stalks blowing gently in the breeze, but the tension was mounting, undeniable. "How do you do it?" he asked quietly. "Stay here day after day with so much space and so little noise?" Emily didn't answer at first. She stared at the fields like they held a secret. "Because peace is earned," she finally said, "and I fight like hell to keep it." Daniel looked at her, and this time he saw it clearly. Not a simple farm girl, but a fortress in boots and denim. Unshaken, unflinching. The wind dropped off for a moment. Then a bird startled out of the trees, and in the distance a single figure moved between rows of corn. Emily froze. Daniel followed her gaze. "Where?" "There, 3rd row from the back fence," she whispered, eyes narrowing. The corn rustled slightly, as if stirred by something more than wind. Emily grabbed the binoculars she kept by the kitchen window and focused in. Between 2 rows of stalks, a glint of metal, maybe a scope, maybe goggles, the shape of a crouched figure moving low. Her stomach turned to ice. "They're here," she said, "on foot." Daniel grabbed the revolver from the table. "How many?" "Just saw one. Doesn't mean he's alone." They moved fast. Emily took the shotgun and slipped out the back door, while Daniel limped to the upper floor to get a better vantage point from the attic window. The field was silent except for the low rustle of stalks. Emily kept low, boots crunching gently against the dirt path that bordered the crop rows. She reached the fence line and crouched behind an overturned wheelbarrow, watching. She heard the sound again, footsteps, software methodical. Then a voice in her earpiece crackle. Except she wasn't wearing one. No, it was from a headset barely concealed beneath a nearby bush. She crept closer and saw him. A man in black tactical gear, crouched and scanning with a tablet. He was alone but had communications. He was marking points, positions, mapping the terrain. She took aim. But just before she could decide whether to warn, shoot, or confront him, Daniel's voice buzzed softly through the CB radio on her hip. 3 more, southeast quadrant, flanking. Emily cursed under her breath. She retreated fast and silent, using the irrigation ditch to slip back to the barn. Inside, she pulled the heavy doors shut and met Daniel's grim expression. "They're plotting a full breach," he said, testing the edges, looking for a weakness. "We don't give them one," Emily said. Daniel looked around the barn. "Have you ever fought before?" "Every day since I was 16. He gave a tight nod. "Then we hold this line." Emily loaded the shotgun, her expression set. "Let's make sure they regret stepping foot on my soil." Outside, the wind carried the faint hum of approaching vehicles. The scouts were just the beginning. The real storm was coming. Here are the next 2 chapters of kindness in the crosshairs. The barn fell into a heavy stillness as Emily and Daniel braced for what came next. Rain had begun to fall again, light but steady, drumming softly against the tin roof. Daniel sat on a hay bale near the rear wall, his jaw clenched, his eyes dark with thought. Emily could tell something was pulling him under. "You're somewhere else," she said quietly. He looked at her, startled, then nodded. "I didn't leave the military because of a conscience crisis, not at first." Emily leaned against a wooden beam, waiting. "I was stationed overseas," he continued. "Private sector contract, quiet job, supposedly, just recon. But the people we worked for, people funding the mission, wanted more than intel. They wanted test subjects." Emily felt her stomach churn. For what? Genetic augmentation, trialing cognitive inhibitors, bone grafts, muscle accelerators, stuff that wasn't supposed to leave a lab. They started testing it on prisoners first, then on captured civilians. I saw a boy, couldn't have been more than 10, strapped to a table with wires coming out of his spine. His voice cracked. "I tried to get out. They threatened my sister, said they'd wipe every trace of me, that no one would believe me. I ran instead." Emily stepped closer. "That drive, it's not just evidence, it's your redemption." Daniel nodded. "But I didn't expect to survive the escape." "You did," she said, voice firm. "And now you're going to finish this." Lightning lit the sky outside. The barn flickered in the glow, and Emily spotted something through the upper rafters, a gap in the hayloft she hadn't noticed before. "What's that?" she asked. Daniel followed her gaze. "I hid something up there, before I passed out." Emily climbed the ladder quickly, brushing aside bales of straw. Hidden beneath a tarp was a small black duffel. Inside were 3 things: an encrypted tablet, a sidearm with spare magazines, and a second flash drive. Silver, not black. Daniel looked up at her. "That one's the decoy." "What's on it?" "Enough to bait them, but not enough to stop them." Emily met his gaze. "Then we make it count." The loft creaked under Emily's boots as she stepped back from the duffel bag, eyes still locked on the silver flash drive. Daniel, now standing below her, extended a hand to take it. His movements were sharper, more focused than earlier, his adrenaline rising with the threat closing in. "This fake, will they fall for it?" Emily asked. They'll scan it, see a few redacted files, sample data, maybe a comms log from the project. Just enough to look real. It'll buy us time if they find it before the real one. Emily nodded. Then let's hide it where they're meant to find it. She climbed back down, and together they selected a loose panel in the barn's old feed room. Daniel tucked the silver drive behind it, then reset the wood carefully. Not flawless, but enough to fool a hurried search. Back in the main barn, Daniel opened the black tablet. It lit up instantly, asking for a biometric signature. Face and print ID protected, he explained. I designed the protocol with a partner. She didn't make it out. Emily stayed silent, respectful. Daniel pressed his thumb to the screen and let it scan his face. After a beat, the tablet blinked green and unlocked. A storm of encrypted files, maps, logs, and recorded comms flooded the screen. Everything's here, he whispered. Experiments, names, locations, audio of test site commanders, even a video from one of the upgrades. It's monstrous. Emily stepped beside him, scanning the screen. A short video thumbnail caught her eye. Time-stamped a week ago. She tapped it. The screen opened on grainy footage of a subject in a containment cell. His veins glowed faintly. He bent metal restraints with his bare hands. Eyes hollow, mouth twisted in a permanent sneer. Behind him, scientists in lab coats watched behind glass, taking notes like he was a specimen, not a person. Emily turned away. They made him like that? Daniel nodded. And they made more. The wind howled outside. Thunder rolled again, closer now. The faint sound of a vehicle engine echoed in the distance. They're coming, she said. You ready? He locked the tablet and passed her a spare handgun. Not even close, but let's do this anyway. Together they left the hayloft and returned to the farmhouse. Emily had lived her entire life defending this land from rust, drought, and ruin. Now she was defending it from monsters in human skin, and she wouldn't let them take it without a fight. The ground began to tremble before the sound reached them. Emily stood on the porch, shotgun in hand, eyes to the sky. The setting sun painted the clouds in soft pinks and oranges, deceptively serene, but the low, rhythmic whump of helicopter rotors sliced through the calm like a warning bell. Not thunder, not wind, rotors. Daniel stepped beside her, squinting into the distance. That's not civilian aviation. The black dot on the horizon grew quickly, then another appeared beside it, both flying low, fast, purposeful. Eyes in the sky, he said. They're scanning. Emily didn't move. You think they've got infrared? They've got everything. She glanced at the barn, now layered with shadows and silence. They'd moved the real drive deep into an underground storm pit beneath the cellar floor and made the barn look lived in and cluttered, nothing to draw immediate attention. The helicopters roared overhead. Emily's hair whipped in the wind. One broke off and circled, slowing down. A spotlight clicked on, sweeping the field. Daniel tugged her inside. We can't be spotted out in the open. Let them pass. They ducked into the kitchen just as the light scanned across the porch. Inside, the old floorboards creaked under their weight as they crouched low. The choppers hovered for several long minutes, windows rattling, chickens in the coop screeching. Then began a slow arc away, following the tree line toward the river road. They're not landing, Emily said. They're just marking the perimeter, Daniel replied. The ground team comes next. Sure enough, within 10 minutes, the faint sound of vehicle tires crunching gravel echoed in the distance. Emily clenched her jaw. They're hurting us. No, Daniel said darkly. They're surrounding us. Emily moved quickly through the house, checking barricades and resetting traps. Daniel pulled a black device from his satchel and placed it near the center of the farmhouse. It looked like a battery pack crossed with a radio. He pressed a button, and a faint green light pulsed. Signal jammer, he said. Buys us about an hour of blackout from their side. They can't coordinate with the choppers while it's active. Emily raised an eyebrow. Won't that cut us off too? Daniel smirked grimly. Only if you were planning to call for help. I wasn't. She checked the old CB radio anyway. Dead now, filled with nothing but static. No help was coming. No one even knew what was about to go down on her land. We've got maybe 15 minutes before they breach the perimeter, Daniel said. Maybe less if they split into units. Emily nodded, pulling back the rug over the trap door in the kitchen floor. We've got a fallback if we need it. Old root cellar leads to the storm tunnel. It's tight, but it empties out at the creek. Daniel looked impressed. Smart. Have you ever used it? Once. Tornado when I was 16. He knelt beside the trap door. If things go sideways, that's our escape route. But if we run, they'll torch this place. We can't leave until we're sure the real driver's safe. Emily stood. Then we don't run, unless we have to. A loud knock jolted them both. It came from the back door. 3 precise raps. Emily froze. No one used the back door. Not neighbors, not delivery trucks, not anyone who belonged here. Daniel raised a finger to his lips and crept through the hallway toward the rear. Emily followed, heart hammering. They reached the door. Silence. Then another 3 knocks. Daniel raised his weapon. Emily unlocked the side closet and pulled a mirror from the wall, angling it just enough to see the back porch through the window glass. No one. But the door's frame had something new. Just barely noticeable. A tiny black dot like a pinhead. She gasped. It's a tracer. Daniel's face went pale. They weren't trying to come in. They just wanted to tag the house. Emily's breath caught in her throat. Then it's a countdown. A 3rd helicopter rumbled back overhead, slower this time. From outside, in the darkening twilight, the hum of drones joined the mechanical chorus. Radio silence, total blackout. The hunters were closing in. The first breach came with barely a sound. Emily had been watching the west pasture from the attic window when a flicker of movement caught her eye. 3 dark figures low to the ground, weaving through the tall grass like predators in a hunt. The spotlight from the last helicopter had passed only moments earlier, casting momentary shadows that made tracking nearly impossible. They're in, she whispered. Daniel looked up from the tablet. How many? 3 west. Could be more to the north. Daniel tapped his comms disruptor. Still jamming them. They'll be flying blind until they get close enough to use hand signals. Emily grabbed her shotgun and moved toward the stairs. Then we use that to our advantage. Downstairs, the old farmhouse felt like a bunker. Every window was boarded except for 2 narrow gaps they'd left open to spot movement. The lights were off. The only illumination came from a lantern dimmed to almost nothing. Emily crept to the front hallway. One of the motion detectors, a simple battery-powered garage unit, buzzed faintly. Someone had reached the porch. Her hands tightened around the shotgun. She raised it slowly and took position behind the front door. Daniel crouched across from her, sidearm ready. A beat, then a sudden crash. Not the door, the rear kitchen window. Glass shattered and boots hit the tile. Emily didn't think. She pivoted and ran for the back, flanking around the staircase. A shadow loomed near the stove, sweeping a laser across the wall. She pulled the trigger. The shotgun blast echoed like a cannon in the close quarters. The man dropped instantly, armored but not enough to stop a slug to the chest. "Contact rear!" Daniel shouted. Another burst of glass, living room this time. Emily dropped behind the table just as bullets ripped through the wall, splintering wood and throwing dust into the air. Daniel fired twice. One grunt cried out. Heavy boots pounded the porch. Emily scrambled into the root cellar trapdoor and kicked it open. "Daniel, now, we fall back." He didn't argue. They dove into the cellar and pulled the hatch shut, just as another grenade crashed through the front window. The blast shook the floor above them, raining dirt and plaster onto their heads. The storm had arrived. The storm tunnel was narrow, cold, and wet. Emily led the way with a flashlight, water seeping around her boots as they crouch-walked through the dark. Behind them, distant thuds and muffled shouting echoed faintly, proof the house was no longer theirs. Emily's hands shook as she gripped the flashlight tighter. "They're destroying everything." Daniel limped behind her. "Let them. As long as they don't find the barn cache, we're still ahead." They reached the tunnel exit, a small rusted door behind a curtain of vines that opened into the edge of the creek bed. Emily pushed it open, eyes scanning for signs of movement. Nothing but frogs and moonlight. They emerged into the cool night air and slipped quietly along the creek toward the barn. It loomed in the distance, unburned and untouched. For now. Once inside, Daniel pulled the encrypted tablet from his pack and powered it up. His hands moved with precision, even as his body strained with pain. "We've only got one shot at this." He connected the tablet to the black drive from the storm pit, then set up a secure satellite relay, piggybacking on a bouncing frequency they'd practiced with before he'd fled. "Who are you sending it to?" Emily asked, breath still heavy from the sprint. "Nina Mallory. If she's looking at her secure inbox, she'll pick it up." The progress bar moved slowly. 20%, 33%, 47%. Outside, another drone buzzed past the barn. Emily ducked. "They'll scan for signals. Can we jam them?" "No time. I'll encrypt the transmission, make it look like weather data. If we're lucky, they won't notice until it's too late." At 79%, Daniel paused. He looked up at her. "If I don't make it—" "Don't finish that sentence," Emily snapped. "We both make it." He gave her a small smile. "I wasn't expecting to find someone like you out here." "Good," she said. "I wasn't expecting someone like you to drop bleeding on my porch." The transmission hit 100%. Daniel unplugged the tablet and secured the drives. "Done," he said. "It's out. Even if they kill us, the truth's already moving." A crash from outside. Flashlights swept across the trees. Emily turned toward the barn doors. "Then we hold the line." By sunrise, the worst of the fighting had passed. Smoke drifted from the farmhouse ruins, curling into the soft morning air like fingers letting go. Emily and Daniel, bruised and exhausted, hunkered down in the barn's upper loft, where the walls were still solid and the tech was hidden deep beneath the floor. They couldn't stay much longer. We need food, fuel, maybe a working vehicle, Daniel said, voice raw from smoke inhalation. Emily nodded. Town's 10 miles west, I can make it. Daniel reached for her arm. No, you're not going alone. They could be watching every route. I'm local, she replied, pulling on a faded cap. I know the back trails, the service roads, the places people forgot. After a long silence, he let go. Be back before dark. If you're not, I burn everything and vanish. She gave him a hard look. Deal. The road to town was quiet. Too quiet. Emily drove her father's old ATV through wooded trails and fence gaps, ducking under low branches and avoiding the main highway. By the time she rolled into town, the sun was high and everything looked normal. Too normal. The gas station was open. The diner served eggs. Old men played checkers outside the hardware store. But when she stepped into the grocery mart, heads turned, eyes followed her, not kindly. Morning, she said to the cashier, offering a tight smile. The woman who'd known her since childhood said nothing. Emily grabbed essentials, canned food, bandages, batteries. She tried to act casual. At the register, the woman rang up her items in silence. The receipt printed, and she handed it over with a single sentence. They were here. Emily froze. Who? Men in suits and masks asking questions. Emily's blood chilled. What did you tell them? She whispered. The woman didn't answer, just tapped the side of her register where a sticker had been peeled away. The shape beneath was the faded outline of an eagle. Military-grade tracking. They tagged the building? The woman nodded once. Go, don't come back. Emily backed out slowly, loaded her supplies, and took the long way home. The town wasn't hers anymore. By the time she reached the barn, dusk was settling in. Daniel met her outside, pistol in hand. His expression darkened when he saw her face. What happened? They've been through town, questioned people, left markers. Daniel looked toward the hills. They're tightening the net. Inside, they unpacked the supplies in silence. Emily bandaged a scrape on Daniel's shoulder while he prepared a small pack of emergency gear. You still trust me? He asked quietly. Emily hesitated. I don't know. He nodded. Fair. You've brought hell to my doorstep. My home is ash. My neighbors won't look me in the eye, and I don't even know your real name. Daniel winced, not from the bandage, but from the truth. Daniel Reyes is real, he said finally. But you're right. I haven't told you everything. She stopped. Now would be a good time. He met her gaze. I wasn't just part of the program. I was one of the subjects. Early trial, voluntary. I was supposed to die in a lab somewhere. I didn't. Emily's mouth went dry. So, you're one of them? No, he said quickly. I escaped before the full augmentation began, but the enhancements, they started. I've been hiding it, suppressing it. She stepped back. What kind of enhancements? Daniel lowered his eyes. Reflexes, strength, neural response. But they come at a price. Blackouts, pain, hallucinations. Emily stared at him. You think you're safe to be around? I think I'm still human. Silence fell like a curtain between them. Then she turned away and said softly, Get some rest. We may not survive tomorrow. Daniel stood in the barn doorway long after she'd gone inside, staring at the black sky. The stars above didn't look peaceful anymore. They looked like they were watching. It began with the smell of smoke. Emily awoke before dawn to a strange warmth in the air, not from the heater or the camp stove, but from something unnatural. When she stepped outside, the eastern tree line was glowing. Orange, like dawn had come early. But it wasn't the sun. It was on fire. "Daniel!" she shouted, running back to the barn. He was already on his feet, boots laced, gear packed. "They're trying to flush us out," he said, grabbing the fire extinguisher. "Control the wind and force us to move." Emily's eyes scanned the fields. "It's arson, deliberate." She dashed to the nearby trough and began filling buckets, while Daniel used an old hose from the side barn spigot. They worked fast, dousing the dry brush around the barn, praying the firebreak would hold. But it wasn't just one blaze. The flames were spreading in 3 distinct directions, pinching them between the tree line and the pasture. "They're hurting us again," Daniel growled, not with guns this time, but with heat. Emily looked to the hills. "They want us to flee, and into their net." "No," Daniel said, "they want you gone. I'm the target, but they've realized you're the liability. You're the one who makes me hesitate." Emily stopped cold. "What are you saying?" He met her eyes. "If I run, maybe they will stop chasing you." "No," she said instantly. "Don't even think about it. We started this together. We will finish it together." The fire climbed higher into the canopy. Ash drifted into the air like black snow. The barn's eastern wall began to blister. "Time to go!" Emily shouted. They fled out the south field, hauling what gear they could carry, the last embers glowing behind them. They took shelter in a ravine about half a mile from the property, beneath an old hunting blind Emily's father had built years ago. It was musty and half-rotted but concealed and dry. Daniel pulled out the satellite phone he'd been saving. "I'm making contact," he said. "There's someone who might still be able to help." Emily watched as he typed in a code and waited. A voice answered on the 3rd ring. "Zara." Daniel exhaled. "I need an extraction." There was a long pause. "Where the hell have you been?" the voice barked. It was sharp, no-nonsense female. "You're supposed to be dead." "I was, almost. I've got the package. It's been sent. I need your help." Silence. Then, "Location." Daniel rattled off coordinates. "Jesus, you're still in Missouri. You know they've flagged that zone red. You've got maybe 12 hours before full lockdown." "Can you get to us?" Pause. "Maybe, but not without a deal. I've got buyers interested. Black file, level 7 clearance. If you've got what you say, they'll pay." Emily's eyes narrowed. She mouthed silently, "Can we trust her?" Daniel shook his head, then said aloud, "Not selling, just surviving. I need safe passage, Zara, that's all." The voice sighed. "Fine, but if I smell a trap, I walk." The line cut. Daniel lowered the phone. "She's an old unit contact. Ex-Intel. We worked together once, before all this." "Do you trust her?" "I trust that she loves money more than betrayal. If she sees value in us surviving, she'll keep us alive. For now." Emily stared at him. "And if she's working for them?" Daniel didn't answer. Outside, the fire behind them had dimmed to smoke, but a new tension filled the air, something more dangerous than flames. A woman from Daniel's past was on her way, and she might be their salvation, or the final nail in the coffin. By late afternoon, the sky had turned a strange shade of steel gray, thick with residual smoke, low clouds, and the threat of more than weather. Emily and Daniel crouched low in the ravine, listening to the whirring echo of rotors returning from the east. "They're back," Daniel muttered, pressing binoculars to his eyes. "Two of them. No lights. Search pattern." Emily scanned the horizon. "Same formation?" "No," he said grimly. "This is tactical. They're preparing to land." Moments later, the helicopters banked lower, one circling wide while the other hovered directly over the far end of her property, where the barn used to stand. "They're assuming we ran," Daniel said, "which means we have a window." Emily's eyes narrowed. "To do what?" "Get to the extraction point. Zara won't land in the open. She'll send a signal flare from half a mile out. Once we see it, we move." "And if they intercept her first?" "Then we improvise." The wind from the rotors picked up, rustling the tall grass and shaking loose the ash that still clung to the leaves. Emily watched the land she once called home disappear beneath the movement of war machines. A crackle came from Daniel's satellite comm, a burst of static, then a single word: "Incoming." He snapped it shut. "Zara's on her way." They moved fast through the brush, keeping low, using the old cattle trails Emily had memorized as a child. For now, the helicopters had turned north, pushing deeper into the woods, but it was only a matter of time before they doubled back. As they reached the edge of a dried-up riverbed, a red flare arced into the sky. "She's here," Daniel said. "Go!" But from the west, another sound joined the fray. Engines, trucks, and boots. The noose was closing. Zara's extraction point was hidden at the base of a craggy hill, just beyond the tree line. A modified military jeep was parked, engine idling, camouflage netting barely concealing it. Beside it stood a woman in tactical gear with a buzzed haircut, one hand resting on a hip holster, the other holding a flare gun still smoking. "Zara." She grinned as Daniel and Emily emerged from the trees. "You look like hell," she said. Daniel nodded. "Feels worse." Zara's gaze flicked to Emily. "You the farm girl?" Emily didn't flinch. "Are you the backup?" Zara smirked. "Guess we're both surprises." Just then, the sound of trucks roared from the north ridge. Headlights appeared between the trees. They had maybe seconds. "We're boxed in," Daniel said. Zara tossed him a set of keys. "You two take the jeep. I'll lead the pursuit south." "No." Daniel started, but she was already jogging toward a second decoy vehicle, hidden in the underbrush. "Drive hard, Reyes," she shouted over her shoulder, "and next time leave cleaner footprints." Emily and Daniel jumped into the jeep. He floored it, tires spitting gravel as they barreled toward the ravine trail. Emily clutched the handlebar, shotgun on her lap, eyes scanning for drones. "They'll follow," she said. "They'll try," Daniel replied. Minutes later, the road ended at a collapsed bridge. Below it, an old railway tunnel carved through the hillside, abandoned for decades. Emily pointed. "There, that's our rat hole." Daniel drove off-road, bumping down the slope and stopping at the tunnel's mouth. They abandoned the jeep, grabbed their packs, and entered the darkness. The tunnel was damp and echoing but solid. It would take them miles underground toward the outskirts of the county. Above them, the world was hunting. But down here, for just a moment, They were ghosts again. The railway tunnel spat them out 2 hours later, just as night fell. Their legs burned, lungs strained, and every sound felt amplified. Water dripping, rocks shifting, memories echoing. But they emerged into dense woods behind an abandoned ranger cabin, a one-room structure Emily remembered from childhood hikes. It hadn't been used in years, but it stood strong, hidden by nature and neglect. Daniel inspected the perimeter. It'll do. Inside, Emily started a fire in the stone hearth with dry brush and tinder from a rusted supply box. The warmth helped, but only slightly. They were exhausted, and the air was heavy with questions. Daniel unzipped his pack and checked the encrypted tablet again. Still transmitting backups. The cloud mirror is live. We've got redundancy now. You think it's enough? Emily asked. To expose everything? If it gets to the right people, yeah. But if they find this place, none of it will matter. Emily sat across from him. Zara. She'll lead them in circles for a while. But not forever. They ate in silence, protein bars and bottled water. The cabin had no power, no signal, just the faint crackle of fire and the whisper of wind outside. Emily stared into the flames. After all this, if we survive, what then? Daniel didn't answer. The following morning, Daniel accessed the satellite link one last time. When the encrypted news feed loaded, they both leaned in. The story was out. Nina Mallory, investigative journalist, had published the data. The headline read, Covert Military Biotesting Program Exposed. Human Experimentation on U.S. Soil. The images were blurred, redacted for public release, but the impact was clear. Video clips, transcripts, names. Even the glowing-eyed test subject from the lab had made it into the article. Public outrage spread like wildfire. Emily read aloud. Senator Ronald Wayland, named as an alleged financier. Daniel nodded. That's the one. He buried the program under black budget lines for years. They kept reading. Civil rights groups were calling for investigations. UN watchdogs were preparing inquiries. Protesters gathered outside labs, government offices, and even rural defense contractor compounds. But the joy was short-lived. The article mentions the source, Emily said, voice tense. Not you by name, but it says the whistleblower is still in danger. They know I'm alive, Daniel said, and that I had help. Emily set the tablet down, which means they'll come for me too. Daniel looked away. I'm sorry. I never meant for this. But you did the right thing, she said. Outside, a hawk cried overhead, a lonely sound in a quiet forest. That night, Emily awoke to silence. No wind, no insects, just a low humming noise, electronic. She reached for her shotgun and slipped from the cot. Daniel was already awake, crouched near the door. They're here, he whispered. I don't know how, but they found us. Before she could speak, the front wall of the cabin exploded inward. A concussion grenade rolled inside, blinding white and deafening noise. Emily stumbled, disoriented. Voices shouted, boots pounded. She felt arms grab her, twist her down, and heard Daniel cry out, then fall silent. When the haze cleared, she was zip-tied, face down in the dirt, a black boot pressing into her spine. Target acquired, a voice said over comms. Reyes and unknown civilians secured. Daniel lay a few feet away, blood trickling from his forehead. Emily tried to scream, but a bag was shoved over her head. They were loaded into separate vehicles, the hum of rotors now deafeningly close. As the helicopter lifted off, Emily felt the last shred of safety rip away. She had made it so far, fought so hard. But now the war was airborne again, and she was its new prisoner. When the bag was pulled off her head, Emily found herself inside a steel-walled holding cell. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. No windows, one door, no sound but the slow ticking of time. They had taken her boots, her jacket, even her name. She had asked about Daniel. They said nothing. She sat on the floor for hours, or maybe days. The walls didn't change. No one came. Just meals pushed through a slot and the hum of electricity. But they'd underestimated her. Emily used everything she had left. Scraps of metal from the food tray, loose bolts from the bed frame, even her belt, to build what she could. Tools, signals, hope. She counted steps, memorized guard rotations, and found tiny gaps in the floor vent covers. And she waited for a mistake, waited for someone to get close enough, because they might have separated her from Daniel. But they hadn't broken her, and when she got out, because she would, there would be hell to pay. The opportunity came during a shift change. 2 guards entered, one tall and distracted, the other younger, slower. Emily was slumped in the corner, feigning fatigue. They approached with a new food tray. The door left ajar behind them for just a breath too long. She struck. Using the broken metal sliver she'd hidden in her waistband, she drove it into the taller guard's thigh, twisted, and shoved him into the younger one. The guard shouted, but Emily was already on her feet, grabbing a keycard off the belt as she barreled through the open door. Alarms blared, red lights pulsed. She sprinted down a sterile corridor, boots slapping concrete. Rooms flashed past, interrogation chambers, sealed labs, even what looked like a surgical theater. Her gut twisted. What had they planned for her? She rounded a corner and found Daniel. He was strapped to a chair in a glass cell, bruised but conscious. His eyes widened in disbelief. "Emily!" "No time," she gasped, swiping the stolen keycard. The door hissed open. She yanked him free. "Can you walk?" "Enough," he said, groaning. They moved fast, ducking into maintenance corridors. Emily had memorized the emergency maps near her cell, a habit born from farming survival, now her secret weapon. Eventually, they reached a side exit. Outside, a hangar, a row of armored vehicles, a helipad, just one chopper on standby. Daniel looked at her. "We're not going back to the farm, are we?" Emily shook her head. "We're finishing this." Hours later, they landed on a rooftop in Washington, D.C., a secret meeting coordinated by Nina Mallory, the journalist who had released the story. The moment they stepped off the chopper, cameras flashed. Emily blinked at the crowd gathered below, protesters, media vans, news anchors shouting questions. Armed guards from a private security detail surrounded the roof, escorting them through a narrow hallway into a glass-walled office. Nina was waiting. She stood tall, professional, steel in her expression. "You made it." Daniel nodded. "We brought the originals, physical proof." Emily pulled out a case from her pack, sealed, tagged untouched since the escape. "This has everything, even what we didn't transmit." Nina opened it. "This will bury careers, end companies, maybe even governments." "Good," Emily said. "Let it." A team of analysts immediately began scanning and duplicating files. Lawyers filed protective injunctions. Within the hour, major media outlets were briefed. By morning, the world had changed. Test subjects came forward. Former lab employees leaked names and operations. Senator Wayland resigned hours before federal agents raided his properties. But Emily didn't stay to celebrate. She and Daniel stood quietly in the shadows of a marble hallway as the world buzzed with revelations. "I thought I'd be angry," Emily said. "You're not?" "I'm ready." Daniel looked at her, pride in his eyes. "You did more than save me. You saved the truth." And for the first time, Emily allowed herself to believe she had won. The fallout was immediate and deafening. Within 24 hours of Nina's article going global, government spokespeople scrambled to respond. Press briefings were hastily arranged, filled with vague statements, damage control, and carefully crafted denials. This administration had no prior knowledge of any unauthorized testing involving U.S. citizens. One official declared on live television, "The Department of Defense has launched an internal review." But Emily had already heard it all before. Smokescreens, shifting blame, procedural language meant to confuse and stall. The footage from the leaked files, however, told a different story. Faces, locations, code names tied to Black Ops budgets, even raw footage of live subjects enduring augmentation trials broadcast under journalistic immunity was too powerful to spin. Public opinion exploded. Protests ignited in over a dozen cities. Advocacy groups formed coalitions overnight. Whistleblowers from other agencies began speaking up, emboldened by the Parker Farm leak, and yet, not everyone was celebrating. Daniel watched the headlines with mixed emotion. "We just exposed a nightmare, and all they want is to bury it under bureaucracy." Emily stood beside him on the rooftop of the safe house in D.C., looking out over the city. "Then we don't let them." She'd once been a girl who mended fences and fed goats. Now she was being called to testify before Congress. Just as the momentum built toward justice, a coded message came through one of Daniel's old contacts. Zara had been captured. She had been running a separate sting operation in parallel, one that tracked the financial arms of the biotech division behind the experiments. Her trail had led her to an offshore facility in the Florida Keys. She never made it back. They grabbed her during a fake meeting, interrogation protocols likely in place. No extraction teams willing to go near. Daniel explained, his voice tight with guilt. Emily didn't hesitate. "We go." Daniel blinked. "Emily, this isn't your fight anymore." "It was never just my fight. She helped us when no one else would. We owe her." Within hours, they were on a private jet arranged by Nina's media contacts. Discreet, fast, unofficial. By nightfall, they touched down on a private airstrip miles from the island base. Armed only with forged IDs, a smuggled flashbang kit, and old tactical know-how, they crept onto the perimeter using Daniel's knowledge of the terrain and patrol routines. Emily, quiet, fast, precise, proved just as skilled in infiltration as she had been in defending her land. They found Zara in a locked cell beneath the compound, drugged but alive. As alarms blared above, Emily hoisted Zara's arm around her shoulders. Daniel covered their retreat, clearing the hallway with a well-placed charge that collapsed the ceiling behind them. They emerged into moonlight, breathless and bloodied, but alive. Back on the jet, Zara groaned, blinking at the ceiling. "You two are insane," she muttered. Emily smiled. "Welcome back." And with that, the trio disappeared into the clouds. 3 ghosts who had once been hunted, now writing the rules. It took weeks before it felt safe again. With Zara in recovery and the investigations in full swing, Emily and Daniel finally returned to Missouri. The ride from the airfield was silent, heavy with memories neither of them had fully processed. When they pulled into the familiar dirt road, Emily stepped out of the truck and just stood there, staring at what remained of Parker Farm. The house was gone, burned to its frame, a blackened skeleton of what had once been generations of family legacy. The barn was partially intact, though fire-scarred and missing its roof. The fields were overgrown, nature reclaiming what war had tried to erase. And yet there was something peaceful about it. "I thought I'd feel broken coming back here," Emily said, voice low. Daniel stood beside her. "You're not broken. You're still here." They walked the perimeter, checking what could be salvaged. The root cellar was untouched. Some fencing stood strong, and a few goats, miraculously, had returned, likely strays from a neighbor's property that found their way home. Emily knelt down beside one of them, petting its head. Even they came back. Daniel smiled. "Seems like the land remembers you." That night they camped beneath the stars, the soft sounds of crickets and distant owls, a quiet balm to their scars. And for the first time in months, Emily slept without fear.
Word of Emily's return spread quickly through the surrounding county. At first, there was hesitation, whispers, curious glances at the feed store or post office. But then came something unexpected. Help! Neighbors stopped by with tools, timber, livestock feed. An old friend from school offered to rebuild the porch. A retired veteran donated supplies for fencing and roof work. "I read about what happened," one farmer said as he dropped off hay. "I always thought you were tough. Didn't know you were a damn hero." Emily waved it off. Just did what had to be done. But the truth was harder to dismiss now. The world had seen her. Not just as a farm girl, but as a fighter, a protector, a symbol. A week later, a government official arrived unannounced with a federal whistleblower protection grant and a relocation offer. Emily declined the relocation. "This land is mine," she said. "I'm not running anymore." Instead, she accepted funding to rebuild. Under one condition, the farm would also serve as a refuge for others displaced by the Black Ops program. Survivors, witnesses, whistleblowers. Daniel helped oversee the installation of encrypted security systems. Zara checked in via satellite once a week, and the local paper ran a headline that read, "Farm girl turns freedom fighter and stays to build again."
The rebuilding took months. Daniel never left. At first, he insisted it was only temporary, just long enough to help set up the new perimeter systems, train volunteers, and coordinate supply drops through Zara's underground network. But as the fields began to heal and the barn took shape again, he stopped mentioning leaving altogether. Emily noticed the small ways he made himself part of the land, fixing fences at sunrise, milking goats with a surprising gentleness, memorizing the cracks in her porch, like he'd always belonged there. One evening, after finishing repairs on the generator, he found Emily watching the sunset over the wheat field. He stood beside her for a long moment before speaking. I've been running most of my life, from missions, from people, from who I was. Emily didn't look at him. Not anymore. No, he said softly. Not anymore. They stood there in silence as the sky shifted from amber to violet. Finally, Daniel turned to her. I was a stranger on your doorstep. You could have let me die. Emily's voice was quiet. You weren't a stranger. You were someone who needed saving. He smiled. So were you. That night, for the first time, they shared not just warmth, but peace. Spring came early that year. Wildflowers bloomed along the fence lines, and fresh shoots of green pushed up through the soil where ash had once stained the ground. The Parker farm was alive again, new, different, but still beating with the same heart. Emily walked the perimeter each morning, checking gates and livestock. But now the routine wasn't about survival, it was about care, restoration, legacy. She kept the encrypted drive locked in a fireproof safe beneath the floorboards of the new barn, not because she still feared they'd come for it, but because it was a reminder of what they'd endured and what they'd prevented from happening again. On the anniversary of the breach, Daniel organized a private gathering. Survivors of the program, journalists, Zara, and a few trusted community members came together on the land that had once been ground zero for a secret war. They shared stories, laughed, cried, planted trees. At sunset, Emily stood in front of the new barn, now marked with a simple bronze plaque. For those who choose truth over silence. Someone asked if she regretted it, any of it. She smiled and said, I gave a stranger shelter. He gave me back my voice. The rest was just courage. And for the first time, the wind that swept through Parker Farm didn't whisper of ghosts. It sang of trust. It was a clear blue morning when the sound returned. Emily froze in the middle of the pasture, one hand on a feed bucket, the other gripping the fence rail as the low rumble of rotors stirred the air. The goats didn't panic this time. The cows simply turned their heads toward the sky. The past had taught her that helicopters meant danger, but this time she didn't run. Daniel emerged from the barn, squinting up toward the sound. A small news chopper crested the ridge, white with blue stripes marked with the emblem of a national broadcast network. Not black, not unmarked, and not alone. Another followed it, then a drone, then a camera crew in an SUV down the old road. Emily exhaled. They're here for the story. Daniel nodded. You ready? Yeah, she said, brushing hay from her jeans. Let's finish it right. The reporters came bearing microphones and notepads, flanked by film crews and curious onlookers. They asked her about everything, the fire, the conspiracy, the risks. But what they really wanted to know was, why? Why risk your life for a stranger? Why fight back when running would have been safer? Emily simply smiled. Because kindness matters, even when no one's watching. Months later, Emily Parker stood alone in front of her rebuilt barn. It was morning again, soft light casting long shadows across the fields she'd nearly lost. The land was quiet but not hollow. It hummed with life. Her story had circled the globe. Investigations were still underway. Some arrests had been made. Others were still hiding in plain sight. But what mattered most was that the truth had taken root and grown louder than the silence that once tried to bury it. She picked up a letter from the mailbox, handwritten, smudged with dirt. It read, I saw what you did. I thought I was alone. You helped me believe in people again. Thank you. No name, No return address, just a spark of something rare. Hope. Daniel stepped out onto the porch behind her, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. More fan mail? Emily held up the letter with a smile. Just more proof that kindness isn't weakness. They stood together, looking out over the land that had once been a battlefield. It was hers again, but more than that, it was a symbol, a place where one act of compassion had defied bullets, fire, betrayal, and fear. Because kindness, real fearless kindness, was never just a gesture, it was a revolution.